just believe in the power of healing and restoration. And I know that if we can just come together and speak about the hard things, we can finally begin to heal. So, this is where we heal.
Well, welcome to another episode of This Is Where We Heal. Today, I have an incredible guest all the way from across the pond, as they say. Do you actually live in Britain, or where do you live?
Yeah, I do. I do live in Britain. Yeah, I live kind of a little bit south of London.
Oh, I love it so much. I love the Brits. I don't know why I'm obsessed with them, but I love the accent. I love the cities there. I think they're so beautiful. The countryside, it's all amazing. But what makes you incredible, and I'm so excited for this episode because it was kind of the whole premise of why I even started the show, is that you are actually a toxic relationship expert. And this is Keyleigh Clarkson, and that's her name, which is so funny. We have Kelly Clarkson here in the States. So, but not Kelly Clarkson, it's Keyleigh Clarkson. So today we are going to talk about all things toxic relationships and healing. And that's the other part that I love about what you're doing, is that you're not just talking about the toxic portion or the toxic cycles of relationships with toxic people, but you're also helping women find themselves again and heal afterwards, which is my entire mission as well. So I'm so excited to have you.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here all the way from across the pond. We are
Yes.
currently in a huge heat wave at the moment. So yeah, it's a little bit warm here, but I'm so excited.
We are too. If it makes you feel any better, we are too, girl. It is hotter than blazes over here. So, but
Well,
so I want to talk about how did you get started in this field? Obviously, it's kind of a buzz thing now. Like, people are talking about it. I started talking about it a couple of years ago myself from my own experience, and I can't help but notice that most of the people in this field have their own story as well.
yeah, and I totally resonate. I think when I obviously came across you and found you, I totally resonated on like both personal and professional levels. So yeah, let's go back, I guess. So I grew up, unfortunately, in a household where there was domestic abuse and substance abuse from one of my biological parents. And then things that relationship kind of ended, but things didn't necessarily get better. They just kind of shifted shape. And then the next step parent I had, it was just a different flavor of toxic, I guess. Like there wasn't any physical abuse at that point, thankfully, but it was just a different shape of it. Um, and so obviously I'm young. I've been exposed to this. I don't understand what any of this is, but lo and behold, to me, underneath all these things are kind of impacting my life, and I'm growing with this chaos around me, not knowing my nervous system at the time is obviously being primed to function in that kind of environment. And it wasn't until I kind of got older that I kind of started to see the side effects of what I had been exposed to. And so I went to law school. I became a family lawyer over here, and it was in particularly high conflict divorces, is what we call over here. But it basically means either a lot of high net worth assets, which is, they can be a little contentious at times too, but primarily there was difficult personalities coming through. And so therefore, the divorces weren't quite as smooth as we would have hoped for. And then I moved into child abuse also. So all of that was going on professionally, whilst under the surface, I was growing up and starting to dabble, for university and things in my own relationships, and started to realize I was dating the same kind of people I was supporting my clients with. And I was like, this feels like a really big mismatch here. Like, how can I be the woman here on the front line doing all these things and advocating for, her rights and this, that, and the other? Because primarily my clients would be women. But underneath and behind the scenes, I'm really starting to like trying to hold my life together because it's just not really working out. Fast forward a little bit more, then I kind of did I met my amazing therapist who I've had for so many years now. And thankfully we don't see each other as much as we used to, but I'm taking that as a good thing. I met her, we did some incredible work together for many years. And I kind of started to see there were other things that maybe I needed to do that we weren't quite kind of nailing in talk therapy per se. Then I met my husband, who thankfully is healthy. And that was a whole different ballgame for me to navigate,
Yeah.
because now I've gone from chaos and now, is he really boring? Or like, do I need to start an argument? Because this is kind of strange to me. And then we had to navigate that too. But then I retrained as a therapist here because I felt like at this point I was kind of the wrong side of the table. I'd seen I'd seen toxic and abusive relationships from so many different angles, personally, through my, like, obviously romantically, through friendships and families, even in my workplace whilst I was in the legal arena, and then professionally on that side. And then whilst then obviously going through therapy training too, I'd been seeing it from like a survivor's point of view. So I'd had such a well-rounded, I guess, experience. And I'm not
Mhm.
sure at the time it felt like it was very well-rounded. It felt a
Right.
little bit chaotic. But
Right.
as you say, I think we all end up here because we've experienced it in some shape or form. And yeah, that's kind of how I thought maybe this is my purpose. Maybe I had to go through all of those things to get where I am today. And then off the back of that, that's where my frameworks come from.
That's incredible. And honestly, that's the first time I've heard a perspective like that, where you actually not only did you experience it in your own patterns of choosing people like that, right, while you're figuring it out for other people, but you grew up with those patterns being instilled. Like, so for you, a lot of that was probably even normal, not
Mhm.
okay, but normal until you started seeing it as a lawyer and going, wait, if this isn't, if I don't think it's okay for them, then maybe it wasn't okay for me to experience that either, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Especially as I kind of was dealing with more childcare cases at the time. It was like, oh, okay. So, like, what do you mean? People living in a house where you just yell at each other and throw things at walls? What do you mean? That's like not okay. And then I obviously started to speak to my friends, and they're like, no, like my parents didn't do that. And so I was like, oh, okay, maybe I have a problem. And then by this point, I was getting romantically involved with people myself. And I was like, but you're doing the same things that I kind of seen when I was 2, 3, 4. Like now I kind of know it's a little bit off and it's wrong, but I actually feel quite alive. And that's me being brutally honest. Like I kind of
Yeah.
feel a little bit like I know what I'm doing. I feel slightly alive here. And as I say, then when I met my husband, I was like, hmm, this is a bit boring
You're very
for a
calm
while.
and peaceful and
Yeah.
normal.
Yeah, what do you mean you're not gonna shout at me because, I caught up with my girlfriends for an hour extra than I said I was going to? And he's like, "It's fine, babe." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." It was a very surreal experience.
I know, it's such a beautiful one, and I wanna dive into that in a bit too, but before we do, I wanna talk about, like, what were the patterns that you noticed of yourself that you were, like, paralleling with the people you were seeing, like, that you were going, "Wait a minute. Oh, I'm choosing this too. I'm with these people too."
Yeah, so I think the main patterns for me were dating the same type of person, just in maybe a different packaging, if I can say that.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
then it was also the shame for me really stuck as like, I know that this is kind of wrong, but like I still have that almost magnetic pull to them. And so if I'm kind of here, I might have ignored my gut feeling to begin with of like, oh, this feels a little bit too up and down for me. And then I just kind of passed it off as like, oh no, maybe you're just being too sensitive, right? But
Mhm.
then as I kind of got like a little bit while like further into them, then it was more of like a okay, like if I'm being honest with myself, I know that this isn't right, but I also am really, really finding it hard to leave. And so what is
Yeah.
wrong with me? There has to be something wrong with me. And then you kind of go into the
Yes.
internal doubt, doubting yourself. At this point, I didn't have no self trust. I didn't trust anything. They could have told me anything. And there was one particular relationship in which my life was threatened. And so I knew at that point it was too far. But even then, going through the police and the legal services that I needed to use at the time, I knew I needed to use them, but I felt so bad. And that
Yes.
was like, I'm seeing this for myself. And like now I'm like, oh, I remember X time, or, I remember going through all this here. And I could never really quite resonate with them at the time. But then going through it, I was like, okay, I understand this now.
Wow, that's so powerful and so true, and I'm so glad you brought that up because I do think that, like, women, I think, for the most part, we're nurturing and we're empathetic. To a fault, right?
Mhm.
And when we have become familiar with chaos and toxicity and all of those things, we always are thinking, okay, I probably caused this. I probably did this. I play some role here. It's probably at least partly my fault. I shouldn't have said this. I shouldn't have done this. That's why they're responding this way. And so even when it comes time to leaving, there's a sense of guilt of like, well, I was the reason, I was half the reason it got to where it got. They wouldn't have ever acted like that had I not triggered them or done these things. And so you almost feel like you're doing the wrong thing and leaving in a way, like you're
Mhm.
abandoning someone and something that you maybe partly created, even though that's actually not the reality at all. because
Yeah,
they were who
absolutely.
they were before you ever came along at all. And so I think that's a really important thing to talk about. I want to know, obviously, you're an expert at this stage, and this is what you do for a living. And so if I want to know for like the listener, if someone's listening in right now, we'll say there's a woman that she's in a relationship and she's beginning to see the signs of toxicity. She doesn't really know how to pinpoint them. She doesn't really know what they are, but something feels off. Are there specific things that a woman should be looking at that are a sign for her that, hey, this is not healthy, this isn't okay, and it's time to walk away, even if it's hard?
Yeah. Yeah, and I love that question because I think you kind of answered it almost yourself in that
Yeah.
if something feels off, because I think we're really good, as you say, we're really empathetic, and sometimes it becomes us versus them in that their feelings are bigger than ours. And so we're really there to walk around and tiptoe and walk on eggshells around how what our behaviors might cause, even if it's like to the detriment of ourselves. And so I think the biggest one for me personally and professionally at this point is your body. We can't really get away from our nervous system screaming at us saying, "Hey, this is wrong and this doesn't feel good." And it doesn't even have to be the drastic aside. It could just be like you are completely misaligned down here on a number of things that this doesn't feel safe. And so, if you're waking up in the evening, like between 2 and 4 a.m., like your cortisol is spiking at this point. Like we need to take note if we're having digestive issues, skin issues, hair issues. I remember my hair got really thin and it was just not in a good place. And not necessarily because of anything I was doing. I was just stressed out and my body was speaking to me way before like the logic had kicked in per se. And so I think that's a really good start to know that like, hey, if something's feeling off, it probably really is off. And so that's a really big red flag for me.
Oh, that is such an important one. And that one also kind of leads into learning that self-trust because I think a lot of women it's a learned behavior, right? Like we don't grow up being taught how to trust ourselves really. At least I didn't. And that was to no fault of anyone in my life, but just it's a kind of a newer concept of like learning to trust your body and to trust how you feel and to trust your own intuition and believe it, right? And I can honestly say in my own experience, in every toxic situation that I was ever in, my body was like falling apart. I wasn't sleeping well. I didn't feel good. I either couldn't eat or I was eating way more than normal or, you know what I mean? And I was like in and out of like really, really happy and then really, really depressed. And like my moods were all over the place and my anxiety was like sky high and breaking out, losing hair even in your eyes, and I know you know this because you've been there. Like, I'm sure when if you look back at pictures, I look back at pictures sometimes of myself, and I could see it in my eyes, like there was no life there. There was no life there, you know?
It really does drain everything out of you. And I think particularly the eye situation, like I just feel like there's almost the lights are on, but no one's home. I guess that kind of thing. You really have lost your sparkle for want of a better word. But I also think that we need to kind of look a little bit at like the other side of things where I remember for myself, particularly, I would quite literally be like on the brink of tears, not like crying hysterically all the time, but just like every last little thing. Like I would drop something and like be really full on ready to just cry. And it's just because I was so suppressing all of my emotions so much that like it was going to come out over, I don't know, the bottle of water I just threw on the floor accidentally. Like it was just something so minor. But for me, that's just how it showed up. Like I was always on the brink of crying. And it was like, I'm not necessarily like, I don't feel really depressed today. Like it's actually in the grand scheme of today and the grand scheme of maybe the last year of my life, like I felt okay. Like today was an okay day because I don't think you necessarily always get like the great days because we always know they come after the big kind of blowouts, right? But even on a day where things were, for want of a better word, stable in that
Okay.
relationship and that like I wasn't quite like getting anything thrown in my head or something ridiculous, like I was feeling okay, but the tears were still there. And for me, that was a really crucial sign that like, hey, like I'm really just not myself right now because
Yeah.
we don't tend to walk around really unless we have an underlying mental health disorder that, we're on the brink of tears every 5 seconds.
Gosh, that's so true too. And I think that's also a really good indication of like, if you're suppressing your emotions, there's a reason for that. Like, if you don't feel safe enough to have them with someone, there's a reason for that because it should be safe for you to express, like, I'm feeling really sad or to cry or to even be angry, to even get upset. Like, it should be okay. But when you're in an abusive and toxic relationship, that person controls that part of you. Like, you feel shame for it. You feel guilt for it. You feel like something's wrong with you for being human, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think even just like not being able to, at this point, censor myself around my friends, right? Because they were either sick of me talking about it, because not for
Mhm.
any fault of them, but like we've had the same conversation about 15 times now. And what do you kind of want us to do at this point? Because you're still choosing this person, and not in like a horrible mean way. My friends are the best in the entire world. But like then you don't want to bother them more than they want you to bother them, if that makes sense. Like you feel
Mhm.
guilty for talking about it for the 15th time over a voice note that you sent. You could literally just resend the same voice note you sent 3 weeks ago, right? But I think that again, you're holding it in for yourself. The shame element again, like I feel like that's a really big part for me and my clients is the shame of like just being there and still going through it and still staying. And it's like there's no shame to be had, because we all go back 15, 16, 17 times. We all have to get to our own point in which we are good and safe and ready to leave. And that's absolutely fine. But we're already being shamed and gaslit for whatever behaviors we've done in the relationship. We have the shame of we probably should know better because X, Y, and Z means we should know better, that we've kind of created in our own heads. And then we have the shame of like, keep talking to our friends about it, and then we don't, and then we don't have the support network that we need, because support network, I believe, is so crucial. And
Yeah.
then when we're not reaching out and relying on that, you are literally just like a ticking time bomb full of emotions. And then that's obviously then when we can start to dissociate, or we can kind of go the opposite way.
That's so true. Let's talk about that, about going back over and over and over again. And like, what do you think the reasoning is for that? I mean, and I have my own theories too, because it's every victim's story. We all have, honestly, even though we thought we were strong, we thought we were confident women before we met this person. We thought we'd never let someone treat us in these ways, right? And then you find yourself in a situation and you're almost like you don't even understand your own actions. You're like, why am I going back? Like, so let's dive into that and talk about that.
Yeah, so I would love to hear your theories too. I think this is a great topic. Personally, for me, I feel like I guess it's a little bit like a wobbly tooth analogy, and I know it sounds absolutely bonkers, but kind of like you have to get to a point for it to fall out, right? We always get there, and it can be really, really wobbly, but it doesn't mean that it's not there. And so for me personally, and I see this with my clients too, we can know logically, but logic doesn't outweigh chemicals in our brain. We are literally chemically addicted to this person at this point. It doesn't outweigh the grief that we have to go through. We're all avoiding the grief of leaving the relationship we thought we had, the version of us we thought we were, the future we thought we were going to have. We're trying to avoid generally just whatever we're trying to run from, whether that be a rejection wound, an abandonment wound, a lovable wound, whatever the core wound is underneath that, we're still trying to run away from that too. Because essentially, if we have an abandonment wound, I had one. I
Hmm.
mean, there's probably residue there still, right? But
Hmm.
for the most part, it's good now. I would have to inflict that pain on myself, because that person's probably not going anywhere right now. And so that also feels a lot more safer to me and my nervous system. So then the idea of me having to do that feels so overwhelming. And then we sit in the anxiety stage. And then we get to the point that if we do leave, we then have that overwhelming anxiety that almost our brain goes, the solution to this anxiety is this person.
Hmm.
And so we go back, and now it's almost like we substitute one pain for another pain. And I've seen this a lot actually in the child abuse arena whilst I was in there, in that we kind of were substituting one pain for another. And so whilst we're leaving on one hand, we're now grieving this other thing, but then we go back. And whilst it's feel familiar to our nervous system, to our brain, it's something we've known for the past how many years, then, that's a better pain, but it's still pain, right? And
Hmm.
then I think on top of that, we have the fact that we have sunk cost fallacy. We could have children together. We could have a mortgage, a dog. We could have all these things together. And so it's such a bigger scale than just, we'll just leave. You
Hmm.
can't just leave, nor is it safe. It's not safe to just leave on any point. Like, even if there isn't any physical violence, finances are a major thing when you leave. And so anyone listening, please get a shoebox, put it under your bed, rainy day
Yes.
fund. It's so, so, so important. And I'm really passionate about that for women. I think we should all have, even if you want to be a stay at home wife, mom,
Yep.
whatever it is, please
Yep.
just have your own, because it will alleviate some pressure. I've
That's
seen
so
too many
true.
women not have that. Um, so I don't necessarily know, to your point and to your question, if there's a particular one reason why we go back. I think there are several different things at play. And so it's about juggling and managing and kind of essentially breaking the cord to each of these underlying things that we're trying to avoid, deal with, or get our needs met in some way or another, and then slowly eroding the cords we have to that. Once we've done that, then I think we get to a point where we can eventually leave. And it doesn't mean that it's any less painful.
That's
It
right.
just means that this time, because that you will get to a point, there will be a time where that will be the last time.
Yes.
And there's no shame if that takes you 15 times or 10 times or 5 times. It doesn't matter. We all have our own breaks.
That's right. Yeah, I've heard someone say, I don't remember where this was. They were talking back and forth with a woman about going back, and the typical advice is don't go back, right? I've said it myself, but this woman said, no, go back. Go back 100 times if you have to. Go back 200 times. Go back until you don't ever want to go back again. And I was like, that's actually kind of good advice in its own weird way, because yeah, when you're finally done, you're finally done. And if you have the strength to leave before then, that's great. But a lot of people don't. And so it's, and I also am a huge advocate of, you do get two choices, like both are painful. And there's no way around the two painful choices. You got to pick which one is going to be worth it. And I always say, the pain of staying lasts for as long as you're there. And the pain of leaving is temporary. And so even though both hurt, it ends up with a hopeful, outcome. The other just remains steadily in the pain that you're already in. And so, and that's usually the hardest part, I think, is for women in the toxic relationships. It's like, yes, the toxicity is terrible. Yes, the depression's terrible. Yes, the physical symptoms are terrible. But I honestly think for most women, the hardest part is leaving. And then staying away. The hardest part after that then becomes staying away and not caving to the chemical addiction that's in withdrawal that's saying, we have to go back. That's the only place where we're going to feel better for a second,
Yeah. And I love that you said that, because I always say the hardest, like leaving isn't actually the hardest part, if we're being really honest, because we've all done it about 10 times. The hardest part is really staying away, because as you say, it's not just like the physical front of having someone around. Like you might be on your own now, and for some of us we have like a fear of being alone. Like that's a perfectly valid and reasonable fear. So we have a physical point, we have the emotion of like, we actually did love this person, even if it's like some kind of messed up way, we have a attachment to them. So we have that. And then like you say, there's a chemical version, and there's a chemical side of this too. Like we are literally coming down from the cortisol and the serotonin, the oxytocin, all of those things. We are quite literally on a come down from that. And that's a lot to be dealing with. And so, yeah, the hardest part is staying away from this person and basically kind of fighting your way through that. But there are things you can do to make that slightly better, right? There's plenty of things. There's loads of resources out there that can kind of help you, even if it's just to, hack your happy chemicals for a little bit when you're feeling really low. There are lots of things you can do. It's just, I don't necessarily know if they're widely, like there's like a whole playbook here, because we're all so different, right? So what works for you actually might not work for me, and vice versa. But it's really about finding what works for you in order to help you stay gone.
That's so true. And I always tell people when I'm working with clients myself, I'm like, just if you can do anything at all, starting day one, give yourself 30 days of just completely separating yourself from this person. And it's going to be the hardest 30 days of this entire process, because it's going to be where you want to go back so bad. It's going to take every ounce of strength that you have. If you can just promise yourself, though, to get past that first 30 days, I promise, it gets easier, because that gives your body the time to come down from the emotional high of withdrawal and like the feelings of I've made a mistake and the feelings of I want to go back. And I mean, of course, it takes longer than that, but those first 30 days, I think, are the hardest days. So
yeah, absolutely. And really what we're going through at that point is the chemical detox, if we can call it that.
Yes.
But also we need to kind of recalibrate and decompress our nervous system, because it has been flitting between those like hyperarousal, like we probably haven't been in like a good, healthy, like state in the middle that we can be calm and just sit with. And I think a lot of times we do go back because we are trying to bypass that part, but I don't think it's been made explicitly clear, I guess. And I think we can both probably have experienced this, that you really do need to go through that period in order to get to the other side. I guess it's like the final last hurdle, right? It's the last hurdle that's going to be the hardest hurdle. But at the end of it, you're going to be completely, like, your life will be completely different. And this time, if nothing else, you are the one that's in control of how
Yeah.
this outcome ends. You don't necessarily, there might be legalities to this, right? We might need to have divorces or other things in the background. I'm not saying that it's easy and it's just like 30 days and we're cut and we'll run and we're good. Like, that's not what I'm saying. But I think it's important to know that after we just get through that, the last stint, you then get to control how the next 5, 10, 15, 20 odd years of your life looks without having to live in somebody else's version of life that actually really
Yes.
hasn't served you at all.
Yes, that's such a good perspective and so good. What would you say, like, what are the tips that you give a woman when you're like, okay, these are the things you should do to prepare for the day you decide to leave and to prepare for what it looks like after?
Yeah. So I think, again, this is kind of a little bit situation dependent because I have my lawyer head no matter how hard I tried to get rid of it, she's still there. I think safety plan is really, really crucial. It has to be a must regardless. So if there is physical violence, we need to have the appropriate legalities in place and support systems in place. And they are obviously of a higher caliber and a higher support need because, I mean, hello, we have abuse here physically. I guess if there's no physical abuse, my tips would be we have to obviously financially, and this goes for both, I guess, but I think
Yeah.
that's just the extra layer that I would want to add on.
Yeah.
But I would say like the non-negotiables for everything is financially, we need to get to a good place. Support system, you really do need a support system, even if that
Yes.
support system is just one person. It only takes one person, right? That's all you really need. The more, the merrier, as long as they're healthy, because we don't want to be having any
Yes.
messy behavior on the outside. And then again, like having a self-care plan and a self-soothing plan is going to be your best friend for the first 30 days, but also beyond that. So what I mean by that is self-care. Let's face it, like we neglect ourselves enough in these relationships. We've probably not been
Mhm.
taking a great deal of self-care for ourselves.
Mhm.
Just quite literally pick 15, 20 minutes a day, every day that you're going to commit and promise to yourself. Because at this point, also, this is like a duality. I love this one because we are rebuilding our self trust at the same time of doing this. So,
Mhm.
hey, we need that, right? Just pick 10, 15, 20 minutes a day and make sure you're doing it every single day where you're just going to do something that you can literally turn off from, whether that's doing your skincare before you go to bed, because that's for relax, whether that's just sitting down with your favorite book, your favorite TV show, going for a walk with a podcast, whatever you want to do, right? Just make sure you're doing that every single day, even on the days where you feel like you don't want to get out of bed. Then you do the 10 minutes, right? It's just about doing the one thing. Because obviously, at the same time, as I just said, we're rebuilding our self trust at that point too. So we're taking care of ourselves, but giving ourselves a good couple of minutes to have some space to ourselves just to kind of exhale a little bit, and we're rebuilding self trust. And then also, in terms of the self soothing plan, that's when we come to the nervous system regulation because we are going to need that. So there are lots of resources out there. Pinterest is fantastic for this, but generally, like, there's a couple, you need to find what works for you, but there's a couple, right? So we could have like the 4 square breathing, which I'm sure plenty of people heard about. You kind of breathe in for 4, hold it for 4, breathe out for 4. We do that a couple of times. Start off little and often with this one because we don't want anyone to be passing out. We do that for a couple of times. We also have like the butterfly hug. So, interlock your thumbs and kind of
Mm.
have your fingers on your clavicles. This is EFT. It's great. And so we can put them, so just interlock
There we go.
them. Yeah, perfect. And then like simultaneously just tap your collarbones whilst doing your breathing. And that's bilaterally stimulating your brain to calm you down. If you're in a work meeting, if you're in the middle of a restaurant, if you're just somewhere you don't want people to know, it's great. You can do it, but on your knees, and it does the same thing. That's just obviously slightly better. It's near your heart and your brain, it works. That's slightly better, but you can do it on your knees too. There are various different things that we can just do to kind of calm our nervous system down. Because I think at that point, as we mentioned earlier, the first 30 days are a pretty wild ride. And so our nervous system is trying to recalibrate itself. So we are going to be feeling highs and lows, and they're perfectly normal. But it's just about bringing yourself back to whatever is going on in front of you at the time rather than trying to like spiral. Because I feel like sometimes when everything feels really big and it's too heavy and it's too much, again, that's then going to push us to want to go back because this right here is too overwhelming. But back there, it's familiar, and our brain likes familiar. That's just how it's wired, even if familiar is not safe. So
Mhm.
we need to try and do in these first couple of weeks, months, try to really keep us, tiptoeing on the line of like, this is slightly uncomfortable, but it's not too uncomfortable that it's going to send me back there.
Yeah. That's so good. Those are such wonderful tools too. And even though like you might think at first like, "Ugh, how's that going to help me?" The little things really do add up when it comes to healing your nervous system and just like coming back down out of like the cortisol and just the highs and the lows and like recalibrating just your entire system, you know?
Yeah.
Um, so with that, let's dive into, which I'm sure there's a lot of similarities here with this, but rebuilding after. Like what life looks like after you leave. When you finally make that choice and you've made it for good. And you're like, "Okay, but I feel so low. I feel so empty. I feel like I'm walking away." Well, even just throw the other layer of I'm walking away from someone who provided for me, and I don't know who I am anymore because you do. You lose your entire sense of identity. What are the things that you think are a necessity to just rebuilding a life that feels good?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, to your point, I think the first thing I would say is self compassion, which feels really hard because we probably still have their voice in our brain, sorry. And so we still will be beating ourselves up, even if it's just like, I know I've left and this is the right decision for me, but I still feel bad. Like maybe it wasn't that bad. We're still going to have those ruminating thoughts, those obsessive thoughts, regardless of how we've tried to get out of it. And even if we've been preparing, we're still going to have them. They're really, really normal because of everything that's going on chemically with us. So I would say that just having the self compassion to yourself, but also trying to remind yourself. So, a great thing I like to do with my clients, and this is not so we sit here, we can feel our feelings, absolutely fine. We must feel our feelings. We have to go through the grieving process, otherwise, we're not going to get to the other side. This is
Yeah.
a loss, essentially, even if it's a really terrible loss. I don't know if that's a good way to say it, but even
Yeah.
this isn't a good loss, like it's a bad loss. And so, it's still good for us, but it's still a loss, right?
Yeah.
Grab your notes app, write down the things that were bad in this relationship. And this isn't to like slate the other person or anything. And you don't need to be like, he was. You could just say there was like yelling a lot, if that makes it feel slightly more palatable at the time. And every time you feel like, okay, I might want to go back, take a look, remind yourself why. Because we have this awful tendency, our brain does it, it's absolutely brilliant. Except it's really not sometimes. It just puts those rose tinted glasses back on, right? And so it wants
Mhm.
us to go back. And so I think when we start to understand that our body at the moment is kind of working against us and that our brain is trying to go back to the familiar thing, we can start being compassionate with thoughts we're still having. We can start being compassionate about how long we stayed because we weren't really staying. Like now, logically, this version of us here like is completely different to the version back here. But the version back here was having some kind of need met to a really weird and warped way, if you
Mhm.
like.
Mhm.
But so in order to have compassion for them for staying, and I want you to kind of visualize her, and I guess this is kind of a bit of inner child work, but like as a little version of you, and not to make it like, okay, she's a little version, but how would you speak to her? Because I feel like it's great to say, how would you speak to your best friend?
Yeah.
But I'm pretty good with my best friend. We could probably say anything to each other and we're going to totally get it, right?
Yeah.
So I could say to her, like, oh, that's not maybe a good choice, but I don't want to be saying that to me at this
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
I need something a little bit softer than that. So I think how you would say this time, maybe, you at like age 10, age 4, like you're going to have a lot more self compassion. And then I think it's really about focusing on moving forward. And so again, feeling your feelings, just try not to stay there. So set a time period. Like, okay, so like today, because we can control our feelings to a degree, we kind of get to
Mhm.
choose how we feel and how long we stay there. And so today, I don't feel great. So we're going to honor that. And if we need to cry, we're going to cry. But like, we're also going to try and choose to do one thing that's like going to make us happy and move us forward because we
Mm.
need to try and balance the scales a little bit. Because otherwise, that's how we kind of stay and spiral and we get stuck there is when we just kind of sit there and ruminate there.
Mhm.
And in terms of moving forward, it's really about building a life that you absolutely adore. Because I can
Yeah.
guarantee you, friendships have slipped, hobbies have slipped. Your self care, looking after yourself, all of these things have slipped. Like you might not see your family as much. And so it's really about rebuilding these relationships, the relationship you have with yourself. That's obviously the crux of my work, really, is to rebuild the
Mhm.
relationship you have with yourself. And so kind of rebuilding the self trust,
Yeah.
rebuilding your intuition again, putting all the things in place with your boundaries, with your standards, with your core values. Because I work with a lot of ladies, and then we'll say, okay, so what do you even want your relationship to look like? So we do a what is love activity. And so we sit down and we say, okay, so what does love look like? Because we'll think here logically, I really want a healthy, safe relationship. But then I say, okay, but what does that look like? And they're like, I want them to be obsessed with me. And we're like, okay, so maybe we need to do a little bit of work here without any shame and judgment. But like those two things kind of don't go together. So it's really
Yeah.
about now re-looking at what you want your life to look like, but also what you have built, I guess, love and relationships to look like. Because it's great being out of this one relationship, but if we haven't really figured out the safeties and the healthiness and the boundaries, we're going to end up back in again, as I did for many years, the
Yeah.
same guy in a different packaging. And we don't want to do that again. So we can't get all this way and do all this great work and really start to be like loving our life and having these great experiences, you know, going traveling wherever we wanted to do with our friends. And then we then start thinking like, hey, let's start dating again. And then you're like, oh yeah, but I really want him to be obsessed with me. And now we're back at square one.
Yeah. That's so good and so true. And I can honestly say that like what transformed the way that I showed up in connections with other people was the way that I learned to show up for myself. It was doing just that. It was starting from a foundation of I feel very poorly about myself and acknowledging that. I don't love myself. I don't even care for myself the way I try to care for other people, and having to get really honest about those things. And then being able to say, okay, but what do I deserve? Do I deserve to treat myself like I'm someone worth loving too? And having the grace for the imperfections, having the grace for the bad thoughts, and truly understanding them and where they were coming from, and realizing they weren't even mine. They weren't my own, you know? They were cultivated through my own experiences, and um, reframing the way that I felt about myself and spoke about myself and thought about myself, and then asking the questions. And I do this with my clients too. I always say, like, if you don't know what you need in a healthy person, in a healthy relationship, you're going to settle for a lot of things because you have no goal. You have no aim of what you deserve until you know what you deserve and what you need in a relationship to actually be happy, healthy, and whole. And that's one of the first practices that I do with my clients is, what does that look like? What do I actually need emotionally, mentally, physically? Like getting very, very clear on what a healthy relationship for me is going to look like. And believing that I'm actually worthy of that, right? And so there's like the parallel of working on the self-concept work at the same time as building the list of what I actually know is good for me, and then no longer accepting things that don't look like that. And it doesn't mean people come in perfectly. It doesn't mean every person you meet is perfect, but there's a huge difference in knowing what you want and being able to see whether someone could truly provide that for you, and then settling because you don't have a clue, right?
Yeah.
So,
And I would say also,
no, go ahead. Go ahead.
oh, I was just going to say there's one part I really loved in that, and like self-love. I think there's a lot of noise out here about like, just love yourself. And like, that's the key to everything. Right. But I disagree somewhat in that I think there's a step before. I think we often don't like ourselves very much to end up in these kind of relationships. As you say, like, well, I'm not even caring for myself the same way as I care for somebody else. But there's a duality. You have the capacity to care to that level and that depth because you've been doing it for this person for so many years. It's now time to turn it inwards. But when we try to turn it inwards, it feels so foreign. One, probably because we've never experienced from other people, but we've never given it to ourselves. And so there's a practice that I like to do, which will make everyone hugely uncomfortable for 30 days of their life. And this obviously comes after the 30 days of your nervous system, like nervous system work and kind of recalibrating that as the first thing, right? And I think this will be good for your listeners. I think they'll really like this eventually at the end, probably not at the beginning. I apologize for the messages now. And it really is just about spending a couple of minutes looking at yourself in the mirror, and not like mirror affirmations, nothing like that, but really like, you'll notice the first time you do it, for me, mine was my nose. And I was just like, now everyone's going to look at my nose, right? So I would be like, I really, really hate that. And so I was putting myself down. But you have to get familiar with those voices in your head. That's your voice. And it's not necessarily, as you say, your voice, because it's probably conditioning. It's probably words from other people. It's all the things before that. It predates us now, but they're still there. And so it's getting very familiar with that voice and knowing, okay, fine. Because at the end of the 30 days, it will no longer seem like a really huge issue because you'll be so used to it. And it's really just about liking yourself at this point. Because I feel like sometimes when we are out in the busy, noisy online space, it's like, love yourself. And I think sometimes it's a really tall order for somebody who really hasn't even liked themselves for a really, really long time. And I think, again, when we add the shame of staying and even being in these relationships, then, we don't like ourselves for that either. And so it's really about building that foundation first, because let's be honest, our relationships are mirrors of the relationship we have with ourselves. And that's not placing blame anywhere.
Yeah.
It's just simply saying, until you have all of your needs for yourself, until you're meeting them for yourself, and you know what that looks like, as you were saying, for yourself, it is going to be impossible for anyone to meet a standard because you can't give it to yourself first. So yeah, I thought the self-love and the self-like thing was perfect.
And that's perfect too, because it goes along with what you were saying earlier. It's you're cultivating and building self-trust. And with that means you start doing things for yourself out of love for yourself, even if you don't feel like you love yourself yet. It's doing the things, like you said, that you would do for the younger version of yourself. If you were to go back and look in front of your 10-year-old self, what would you do for her? Because you love her and you know what she deserves. So what choices would you make for her? And the more choices that you build on and doing, okay, I'm going to do what's right for me. I'm going to do what I would do for myself if I loved myself. The more you build the self-trust and the more you truly do begin to love yourself. And it's such a beautiful process, and it's hard, but it truly changes you, and it truly changes your relationships, and it truly changes the way that you hold standards for yourself and protect yourself in relationships. And yeah, I think that's why I'm really excited about this episode, is because there's not a ton of people in our space. It's talked about a lot. Toxicity is talked about a lot. Abusive relationships are talked about a lot. Self-love is talked about a lot, but there's not a lot of people out that are like, yeah, but here's what it looks like, and here's how you move forward, and here's how you heal, and these are the tools. And so I think what you're doing is really important, especially with your background and your experience as a lawyer too.
Yeah, thank you. And I think it's just really important that I think there is a lot of noise of like, let's focus on the other person, but that really just keeps us stuck there. We do need to have some, what we would call in the therapy space, on psychoeducation around what these relationships are like. I mean, hell, like red flags are a type of psychoeducation to a degree. It's looking at behaviors that are harmful to us. And so I subscribe to that to a point, but I think we also have normalized also getting to a point where let's just avoid what we should be doing over here by being so busy focusing on what they're doing.
Yes.
And I don't subscribe to that any, like
Yes.
I can't, because it really, do you know how hard it is to change yourself? I mean,
Yeah.
let's all face it. Like, we're going to go to January and we're going to have a New Year's resolution. And by January 30th, we've blown it out the water, right? That's
At
really
least
hard.
a few times.
A couple of times. So then we get to trying to change somebody else, and it is 5 times as hard. Like, you can't do it. And so I'm just over the space in which we kind of have that narrative. Like, I don't subscribe to it. And so I'm totally with you. Like, this is how we do it. And it's not pretty all the time. And it's not some magic wand that I can say, okay, here's 6 weeks and here's all the tools. Like, I can give you a whole load of tools, absolutely, and I'm going to walk on that path with you. But ultimately, we have to do it for ourselves. And that's something I had to walk myself. You've had to walk through it yourself. And if anyone had the magic wand to kind of fast forward us and make it all pretty and glamorous, they'd be a millionaire by now.
Yes, facts. But I love that you said that, because that's so true. I've literally had this conversation in the last couple of weeks of like with a friend, but like, it's okay to focus on the behaviors and the toxic person and the things that happen for a minute. It's okay to do that for a moment, to process it and try to understand it, and to like just be knowledgeable on what to look for. Those are important things. But if you stay focused on that, you miss out on the opportunity to become the person that wouldn't tolerate it anymore. Right? And that's why I think, like you said, it's so important to focus on, okay, how do I change? How can I heal? What are the things that help me? Not who were they and why did they do what they did? And what were the signs? And what did I miss? Like, it takes away from the experience of becoming a new person. And you will stay there forever. I've seen people that will stay so focused on the toxic person that they never really actually move forward or heal at all. Because that was the focus, and it becomes this obsession. Whereas let the obsession be about your growth and your healing. Let it be back about you, because they've taken enough of your life. They've taken enough from you. And it gets to be about you now and how you can heal and have a joyful life that is beautiful and feels good and doesn't feel like chaos anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think There is unfortunately like a neuroscientific way behind this. Like our brain is still trying to keep us avoiding the thing we're avoiding. So, what are
Mm,
you avoiding by staying here? What part are you most concerned, worried, scared about? Like, it's all scary to leave. We're starting a whole new chapter of a whole new book. We're going to be a whole new person. Gosh, that feels overwhelming, right? But as we were saying earlier, you get to control that chapter. But when
yeah,
we're staying so focused, we're almost creating like a different kind of trauma bond. Now we're so focused on that that we can't even, we're just trying to avoid whatever work we're trying to do. And I think that is the uncomfortable part, making that decision and commitment to yourself to like, hey, I'm not going to do this anymore because it's so painful to move forward and focus it backwards. And it is going to feel foreign to so many of us. Like, if we had that kind of level of self concept and self esteem and self worth, and we had that relationship with ourselves, we probably wouldn't have ended in these relationships to begin with. Like, that's
exactly.
totally okay. But like, we still have a choice sometimes. And I don't mean like a grand choice. I mean, we just have a choice sometimes. We can stay avoiding the thing and staying in a familiar hell, or we can make a choice and choose what feels like initially a different kind of hell, but we get to control that hell if you like. Like
Yeah,
life is going to have complications. Healing is going to be a little messy, but we have control over that. And yeah, I think that's just a really, really important thing to kind of let's just focus on us for a little bit. Even if it's
yeah,
just for 5 minutes a day. Let's just do
yeah,
5 minutes a day.
yeah. I agree so much. If you could, if you have like someone sitting in front of you and they're at that place now. They've done the work with leaving. They've left and they're like, "Okay, I'm moving forward. I'm rebuilding." Is there what would you tell them? Like what would be the message that you would want to give them with just everything you've been through and what you know now?
Firstly, I'm so proud of you because I feel like sometimes we're kind of going through the stages. And so we sometimes miss how far we've come because you have to come so far. And so, firstly, I'm proud of you. And like, I really see you because going through all of that, good on you, girl, because you've done some work. But like, now this is your time. This is about you first, all the time. Everything starts and ends with you. And now you've taken a step. Continue leading your life as you want to, because I promise you, you are so much more capable than you even can imagine. Going through all of that, you don't even know how resilient you are at this point. You don't know how much strength and courage you have until now the next hard thing comes. And you're like, so easy. That hard thing wasn't even that hard. So, yeah, I'm proud of you. I see you. And you're so much more capable of rebuilding this however you want it to look.
Amen. That's so good. I love that so much. Thank you so much for your time today. Where can people find you and how can they connect with you?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's been great. So you can mainly find me on Instagram. So I'm at I am Keyleigh Clarkson, or I'm on LinkedIn, or you can find me on my website. We're having a little bit of revamp at the moment, but we'll be back over on KeyleighClarkson.com.
I love that so much. Well, if you're listening right now, go check out Keyleigh's page. She has so much great information for you, so many inspiring things to help you with your journey of healing and recovering and finding yourself again. And she also you take clients as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
She
Yeah, one to
she
one
works with
clients.
people one on one and she would be such a great resource for you and you're not alone. And you can find that support system even if you feel like you've lost people along the way. There are so many people that can come along and truly help you rebuild and it's not over for you. You're just beginning. Life is just beginning when you finally make that choice. So, Keyleigh, thank you so much for today. It was such a pleasure to meet you and I'm so proud of you as well. I'm proud of you for what you've done with your story and how you've rebuilt yourself and put purpose in your pain and made a difference. So thank you again so much.
Thank you so much for having me. And Ashley, I am proud of you too.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.